There are many reasons we should not have come out here tonight. Circumstances. But we've been rained out 10 weeks so far this year. Now we're in September, we're getting towards the end of the year, and we want to get one clean pass out of this car. So last week, or 2 weeks ago, so we got rained out last week, we explained that situation we had with the spark plug. So let me get this thing off the trailer, warmed up a little bit, and I'll go over the whole thing, what we found and what we did. Why is this? That was a rough ride home last night. We never left the pit. I winched the car back up on the trailer and we came home. So before I get into the mystery being solved, I'll just bring you up to speed on the rest of it. So we warm the car up. I get up on the trailer, start the car, warm it up a little bit to pull it off, and after it's running for just a little while, it stalls. I can't get it to restart. So I'm cranking it, nothing. Now I knew there was at least 3, possibly 4 gallons of gas in the car, because when we had run it last week, I had put 4 gallons in, and we only ran it 2 times. And I haven't touched the car since. It's been sitting on the trailer, because I wanted to solve the mystery of the spark plug. So don't touch anything else. Don't do anything else on the car. Just leave it all alone. So that's what I did. And I'll talk about the plugs in a minute. So cranking it, and no fire. I give it a squirt from the squirt bottle. She fires up, runs out of gas right away. How is this even possible? I know there's gas in there, and there's no leak. If 3.5 gallons of gasoline had leaked out sitting here in the shop on the trailer, I would have known it. But I said, all right, fine. And I had a couple of gallons of gas, regular gas, that I had brought as just an auxiliary, in case I needed some for the truck or whatever. So I threw that in there, get in, crank it, still nothing. It won't pull any fuel up. Hit it with the squirt bottle, boom, starts right up. We have issues. There's issues here. There's weird issues. All right, so at that point, I winched the thing back up on the trailer and we head home. And the whole way home, I'm trying to, what could have possibly gone wrong? What could have happened here? Because the mystery deepens. So let's go back to 2 weeks ago, the last time we ran the car. We showed you there where it had closed up the gap on the number 2 spark plug. So here it is. Now let's talk about some of the comments, because a lot of you guys were like, oh, you dropped the plug and didn't know it. Well, here's the plug. Here's the access to the plug. I mean, there's no dropping this, okay? So we know that that wasn't the issue. Some people had commented that I smashed the gap installing it. And again, look where this thing is, okay? It's just like zip, right in and out, no problem. It is literally the easiest spark plug on earth to change. So we know that that wasn't it. Now, some other guys had talked about the center electrode breaking free and closing up the gap that way. But I know that was not the case, and you could literally see where the ground strap was bent over. You know, it was making contact. And it was the same thing. Some people mentioned the porcelain breaking free, and we actually did a whole video on the porcelain breaking free on spark plugs. That wasn't the case. No, it was physically shortened. The ground strap was physically, you know, the gap was physically closed up, but there were no contact marks and no signs of heat. Now, typically when you get any type of detonation situation, it's going to show up someplace on the rest of the spark plug, but there was none. The plug was dirty because it hadn't been firing. We made 2 runs with it, really, without it firing. The gap had closed down to 0.06 of an inch. But there were no rings of heat on the threads. You know, typically you'll see 1, 2, sometimes 3 rings of heat when you've got a cylinder that's running extremely hot. There was none of that. No indication of any of that. No indication that anything out of the ordinary at all had happened. There definitely was not a hydraulic situation. And for sure, a rod didn't come loose and, you know, the piston come up and hit it. For no other reasons, we know this isn't the case, because the engine runs fine. It has plenty of oil pressure. It does everything it's supposed to. And this is a stock closed chamber head, and the spark plug is in the chamber, and it's a stock flat top piston. So it would be physically impossible for the piston, the whole piston, to ever come up and actually smack the spark plug. Now, obviously, if a piece of the piston had broken loose, yeah. But no, there's no broken piston in there. We looked. And also, we did a compression test. We went around the motor, did a compression test. Everything was within 10 pounds of each other. That's not the issue. So, what caused the gap on this plug to close up? And now keep in mind, while this plug was dirty, the rest of the plugs in the engine looked nice. The ceramics look good. Like you would say, okay, there's no jetting issues with this thing at all. And why was this thing closed up and dirty? All right, so we go to the track, having not touched anything except I did 2 things. I opened the gap on that plug and I cleaned it, and then I substituted it for the next cylinder. So this is now the plug that we had the issue with. It's been cleaned and regapped, and this is the plug that was in this hole. So this way, if it was a problem with the spark plug itself, it would show up here, and if it's a problem with the cylinder, it'll show up on this spark plug. So that's the only change that we made. So now we go to the track, and now we're going to run this thing. And we have our issues just getting it off the trailer, just warming it up. Pulling what's left of my hair out. Went crazy on the way home. What could this possibly be? So, dropped the car off, and then I'm here. It's still dark out this morning, and I'm like, all right, I gotta find the problem. So, I fire the car. I'm running on the squirt bottle. It runs great on the squirt bottle, but it's not pulling any fuel up. Could the fuel pump be bad? I can't imagine why this thing would never have a problem with fuel supply, but all of a sudden, now it's not pulling any fuel up. So I start working my way back, and the line is clear. So we have is a braided line that runs to a steel line that runs along the frame, and then between the frame and the fuel cell is a piece of braided line. I found the problem. This is the line that goes to the tank, right, to the cell. It's collapsed. It's collapsed. The line collapsed. Now, I doubt that it did it all in one shot. It's probably been collapsing. And so we've been getting, the engine's been running progressively leaner up on the top end. But now here's the thing with this. My whole life I've always run 1/4 mile cars. The 1/8 mile is new to me, just really since I'm doing this channel, we start going to 1/8 mile tracks. So I mean, I know what fuel starvation feels like. I know what it sounds like, I know what it feels like. But there was never any indication of that. That's because I'm still using my 1/4 mile long, you know, sensibilities. 2 carburetors, 4 float bowls, all filled with fuel. You know, because while this was collapsed at the time, it was still letting some fuel through. So it's enough that after you do the burnout, I guess there was enough fuel flow through this line to refill the carburetors, and that'll get you to about the 1/8 mile. So this thing was running lean and detonating upstairs probably just as I was letting off, but it never gave me any indication. If it had been done on a quarter-mile track, for sure, by just after the 8th, maybe 700 feet out, the thing would have just nosed over, and it would have given you all of those seat of the pants indications that, yeah, this thing's running out of fuel. Start looking at the pump, looking at, perhaps it's sucking air somewhere. But no, that was it right there. It collapsed. Now, this line looks like just any other braided line you come across. And this thing has been kicking around here for, I can't tell you how long. I don't even know where it came from. But it was just in a pile of random scraps of braided line that I had a box. And this is the one that we used to plumb the fuel cell. It never leaked, there's never any dripping or anything like that. It never leaked. It never gave any indication of an issue. But it was only after now that this thing has collapsed that I realized this isn't even braided steel. It looks like braided steel, right? But it's not. It's nylon. It's braided nylon. Okay? And the rubber that's inside of there is, well, it's just gummy now. So the gasoline got to it and it killed it. And you can feel, if you run your fingers around along the shank of it over here, you can feel that it's collapsed all the way through. So that's what happened. So I guess I don't know where this line came from. I would have sworn it was braided steel. Who scrutinizes stuff like this? Who looks at a line, to do a material, composition test on it? No, it's a braided steel line. It's the length of braided steel line. Throw it in the car. And if out of sight, out of mind, it doesn't give you any trouble, why would you even look at it, right? It collapsed. So, and this is why I like to use the Teflon, the braided steel, real braided steel, not this, but the braided steel, the Teflon line. A friend of mine who used to scrap airplanes, that was his thing, his business. He was like, the airplanes for the hydraulic systems all use this braided Teflon line. And he gave me a bunch of it. In fact, my 68 Roadrunner is plumbed front to back with that stuff. So it looks just like regular braided steel rubber hose that you would get, but it's actually braided steel Teflon on the inside. And I've been using it ever since. Anytime that I can use it, I do. And I've never had a problem with it. The stuff works fantastic, and it's impervious to anything you put in the fuel. Now this, it's not. I have no idea what the composition of this rubber is, or again, what the history of it is. But it's soft and all collapsy and stuff. So that was the problem. Now the big question is, did it hurt the motor? Because I don't know. Now I'm starting to have my doubts as to, well, okay, obviously it didn't break anything, right? There were no chunks of debris, and it has compression on all 8 cylinders. So I'm confident that it will run okay, but did it hurt anything? Because if it was detonating hard enough to close up the gap on its spark plug, what other damage may it have done? I don't know. But I'm going to repair this, fire the car, make sure everything's, good to go again, and then we'll take it up next Saturday and see what happens, and hopefully we don't oil a drag strip. Yeah, this is why they call it drag racing, right? If you have braided line on your car and you're not sure of where it came from or its age or anything like that, it pays to take a look. Honestly, I didn't even think stuff like this existed. I've only known regular braided steel hose, so I never bothered to see if it was anything else. But it's nylon. It's nylon covered rubber. See you tomorrow.